Maxie leaped to her feet at the sound of Riften's fierce roar. For a split second, the blond man at the door seemed taken aback by the intensity of Riften's ire, but he growled back in kind before long. "How could I have known you'd be engaged like this in the drawing room, Commander? I assumed you would hear me approaching right away as usual. I simply didn't see the need to knock." "Get out!" Riften's bellow turned Maxie's face white as sheet. She dreaded what was to come after the man left the room. She sent a pleading look to the man at the door, but he simply muttered curses through gritted teeth and spun around. "The carriage was waiting for you outside, Commander. You said you didn't want to stay a moment longer at the Croissant Castle." "Keep it waiting, then." Struck dumb, the man scowled before letting out an exasperated sigh. "Please be quick, Commander." The man threw Maxie a displeased look before exiting the room, the door slamming behind him. Maxie studied Riften's face for signs of anger. He scratched the back of his head, then shot her a fierce look. She withered under his intense stare, and he scoffed at the sorry sight. "I won't pounce on you again, so no need to tremble like that. Hell, I never even planned to jump on you here." She dared not raise her head. Instead, she stared at her clasped hands as if she were trying to bore a hole through them. Riften rose from the sofa and straightened out his disheveled clothes. "You heard him, didn't you? The carriage is waiting. It's leaving soon." Maxie felt the blood drain from her body. He had tried to ravish her only moments ago, and now he was speaking of leaving. She had not yet managed to convey a single coherent thought to him, let alone persuade him. But... In her panic, she desperately clutched at his tunic without noticing the state of her own rumpled clothes. Could we talk for a moment?" "There's no time to lose. Get the servant to pack your things. We'll talk in the carriage." Maxie had been shaking with fear, but now a puzzled expression dawned on her face. She repeated his words hesitantly. The things?" "Yes, your things. Do you not have things to bring with you?" She blinked, still not understanding. A great sigh escaped Riften, who deftly adjusted her clothes into some semblance of propriety. He hoisted her up, then called to the maid-servant, waiting just outside the door to pack her bags. Even after hearing his order, Maxie could not believe that he really intended to take her with him. "Pack only what you need. We can't dally too long." There's not much to take. Just a few." "Good. We'll leave now then. If you need anything, you can find it in my estate." Riften sent the maid-servant away and led Maxie out of the drawing room. She almost had to run to keep up with his giant strides. Everything was moving so quickly that she did not have the faintest idea of what was happening. Your estate?" "Why? Does it amaze you that a lowly knight would hold land of his own?" He glowered at her over his shoulder, voice dripping with sarcasm. "King Reuben bestowed an estate upon me when I became a knight, along with a castle that should have become your home after our wedding." Maxie only grew more confused. The castle that should have been her home? But Riften seemed uninterested in explaining further. He was already striding down the staircase that led to an expensive garden. Next to the colossal fountain stood an extravagant carriage pulled by 4 horses. An entourage of 15 or so knights stood guarding the carriage. Their boisterous voices died down when Riften and Maxie approached. Some of the men threw furtive glances at Maxie, who stood awkwardly behind Riften. She felt her cheeks burn under their curious gazes. "What are you waiting for? Get in the carriage."
But the father is waiting for me. I need his permission."
Riften's face hardened at the mention of the Duke. Tightening his grip on her arm, he dragged her towards the carriage. "You are my wife. Why should I need permission to take you with me? Your father has no right to interfere." With that, he lifted her up and placed her in the carriage, where she sat in mute astonishment. My wife. Did that mean he didn't intend to divorce her? She could not untangle the thoughts jumbled in her head. "Go!" Riften shouted out of the window, seating himself across from Maxie. The carriage rattled to a start. Still in disbelief, Maxie watched as Croiso Castle shrank into the distance. She had run through dozens of scenarios in her head as she pictured the reunion, but none of them had prepared her for this.
Why is he taking me with him?
She stared dumbfoundedly at her husband, who was taking in the passing scenery with one arm draped over the windowsill. He looked calm and composed. Could this be the same man who had rained blustering remarks and kisses on her before bounding out the castle, dragging her with him? She recalled her father's words. "King Reuben has offered the princess's hand in marriage. He will not let such an opportunity slip by." Duke Croiso had drilled those words into her head, but he was not the only one who had assumed that Riften would marry the princess. A renowned sorceress, Princess Agnes, had fought alongside Riften in the campaign against the Red Dragon. Two warriors falling in love after sharing the thrill of the battlefield was an irresistible piece of inspiration for the bards, who wasted no time in composing and performing their romantic tale throughout the city. All who had heard news of the princess and the knight's victorious return were anticipating a royal wedding. Maxie herself thought that divorce was inevitable. Even the cleric who had officiated their wedding would not have disagreed. Everyone knew that Duke Croiso had strong-armed Riften into marriage, and Riften had every right to demand a divorce. So why? Maxie stole a glance at Riften's finely sculpted features. His tousled hair sat splendidly atop his chiseled forehead, rippling in the gentle breeze blowing in through the window. His lustrous golden brown skin gave him an exotic appearance. The artist's campaign had put a sharp edge on his naturally stony face, giving him a forbidding air. Maxie had never seen Princess Agnes in person. Rumor had it that the princess was a remarkable beauty, with brilliant golden hair and deep blue eyes. Maxie imagined that standing together, Riften and the princess would look like a work of art. Her attention turned to her own reflection in the carriage window. A broad, round forehead and a small, low-bridged nose dusted with brown freckles. Large, round eyes that seemed to throw her features off balance. Wavy hair twisted into a single braid, stray strands sticking out like pieces of straw. She could only think the worst. It was impossible that Riften really wanted her as his wife. There had to be a catch. A secret design, perhaps. What was he planning to do with her? As if he sensed her misgivings, Riften whipped his head around to look at her. Shriveling before his piercing look, Maxie averted her eyes. She must have done something to displease him, for he began to curse. You find me so unbearably repulsive. At least try to hide it. I don't have the slightest intention of jumping out of the carriage to spare you the trouble of my company.
You aren't repulsive. I never said.
Then do something about the dreadful look on your face.
Maxie's hands flew up to cover her face. It was true that she felt uncomfortable and afraid in his presence, but she had not realized that her expression so clearly betrayed her feelings. Knowing that her face had angered him, she was at a loss for what kind of expression she should wear. Riften sighed.
You must realize that we're not like other married couples.
Maxie felt cold sweat beading on her forehead.
I don't know much about you,
he continued.
And you don't know much about me, but you are my wife, and that means I am to spend the rest of my days with you. How can I treat you as my wife if my mere presence is enough to make you tremble like a leaf?
The rest of your days with me?
Seeing her surprise, his features twisted into a frown. We were married 3 years ago. We were man and wife. Aren't couples supposed to live together for the rest of their lives?
She looked at him as if he had suddenly grown another head. She could not believe her ears. Did he genuinely want to be his wife, or was he lying for some ulterior purpose? Perhaps he was mocking her, thinking that she had not yet learned of his engagement to the princess. Increasingly distressing thoughts filled her mind.